Good morning, everyone. If you can you hear me? It's okay? Okay. It is a real pleasure to introduce Professor Marco Vivarelli, one of the leading international scholars in the field of innovation, labor economics, and technological change. He's one of the most cited researchers in the economic field. I'm going to briefly present him, but I think everyone has known and has read his research. Professor Vivarelli is full professor of economics and head of the Department of Economic Policy at the Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore in Milan. He holds PhD from the University of Sussex in Science and Technology Policy and the University of Pavia, Economics, and has built a distinguished academic career at the intersection of research and policy advising. Through his work, he has collaborated with key international organizations, such as the International Labour Office, the European Commission, or the World Bank, focusing on the socioeconomic effects of technological innovation. He's also a research fellow and a member of the European Academy of Science and Arts. His research explored how innovation, and more recently in artificial intelligence, is reshaping employment dynamics. I think today's conference could be very interesting in this regard. He has published extensively in top journals, a long list of journals such as Research Policy, Small Business Economics, Industrial and Corporate Change, and so on. I'm not going to say everything. In a time when the future of work is a central concern, I think Professor Vivarelli brings clarity, evidence, a critical perspective to the debate. So thank you so much for coming to the Jornadas of de Economía Laboral. Thank you for coming to Oviedo. The floor is yours, and we are willing to hear from you.
Thank you, Begonia, for your kind introduction, and thank you to Begonia and the organizer for inviting me. I'm very happy to be with you today. It's actually my second time in Oviedo. I've been here as a tourist in the past, and it's also the second time giving a speech in this conference. I remember about 10 years ago in Universidad Autónoma in Barcelona, Hector and the committee, they were so kind to invite me. So I hope to present something different in comparison of what I did 10 years ago, but it should be, because it's based on two recent papers. So it should be different. But the issues is similar, because at that time my speech was about, in general terms, the relationship between technology and employment and the possible labor-saving effect of new technologies, and how compensation by the market mechanism could be effective or not in counterbalance the labor-saving effect. This is not the precise issues today, but of course in the general discussion I will try to stay, I hope, in about 45-50 minutes in order to have a lot of time for question and discussion, and of course we can also going beyond the issue that I'm discussing now to the more general issues of technology and employment. So my presentation today is based on two papers, co-authored with Giacomo, Vincent, and Daniel, recently published, dealing with artificial intelligence. First, in general terms, and the research question is artificial intelligence a revolution, or is a kind of deepening within the ICT, information communication technology trajectory? And this, of course, has a very different implication in terms of market structure, economic policy, and the labor market implication. While the second part will be more on the impact of AI, looking this time at the bright side of the coin, so the possible labor creation, job creation impact of AI innovation. The main limitation of both the studies are in the data, because as you can see, if you can, from these graphs, so this graph is based on the recent scientific literature on AI, coming from physics, data science, and so on and so forth. Again, it's not the focus of the paper, but to give an idea of a field that is changing over time. So even within the AI field, there are changes. And the one that we detected looking at the literature, the scientific literature, is that there have been a clear shift in the last decades from automation, well, learning process and network analysis. They were already at the core of the AI, but automation and robots, they were also centered in the development of the literature. Now automation is a little bit peripheral, is the green area that is on the right, and the main core of the scientific literature is about, again, neural networks, but machine learnings and learning systems. This, of course, is the scientific literature, so in terms of technology and social impact, there is a lag of 10 years, 15 years, but this is predicting a great change. So, limitation in the data. The data are unique in a way. We will spend some details on the data set, but are truncated at 2016. So what we are actually examining is the, let's say, the nascent phase of AI. AI has developed a lot since the 50s, but the big boom was after 2000, and particularly after 2010. And then you have the generative AI that has come out a few years ago. Unfortunately, we cannot cover with this data set this new generation of AI. But still, in the 20 years that we are examining, there are some changes that, in our opinion, are quite interesting to predict whether this is a revolution or not. We are now in the process to work on more recent data. We work on the patent data. With patent data, you have a natural lag of 3 or 4 years, because the WIPO and other institutions, they take some time to validate patents and to make available in terms of research. And so when we started this work, it was around 2020. The data were available until 2016, and then to get the results, we took some time. Now we are working on a new data set, and we will probably replicate this analysis that I'm discussing today. So this is more or less the plan. We will first discuss the first questions, if we are facing or not new technological paradigm, or a deepening of the information communication technology trajectories. And the second part, we will focus on the labor market. So first of all, so the first part is more on the economics of innovation. The second is more on labor economics. So definition. Thomas Kuhn, that is the guy on the left, that was a physicist, but also a philosopher, mainly a philosopher of science, introduced the concept of scientific paradigm, while Giovanni Dosi, that is on the right, translated the concept in terms of technological paradigm. So what is a scientific paradigm in Kuhn's philosophy? You have a change of paradigm where you have really a kind of scientific revolution. That is, in a way, is changing the object on the table, is setting a new tables in terms of devices, in terms of research questions, in terms of industries that are moving the scientific progress and the technological progress. So for instance, Galileo and Copernicus, they open up a new scientific revolution, new scientific paradigm. Giovanni Dosi moved the concept to technology, saying that a paradigm is a vision that identifies and solves a selected set of problems using a selected set of scientific principles and technological materials. To be more concrete, if we look at the history of capitalism, we have at least 5 different paradigms. So you have the first industrial revolution based on mechanization and factory systems. That is the first paradigm. Then you have the second industrial revolution in the late 80s with the steam power and railways as the key technological invention that are driving the change. Then we have something that we have memory of that is the Fordism. First, the managerial capitalism with electricity, steel, and Taylorism as a new organization of labor. And then we have a Fordism and the golden age of the capitalist evolution. That was mass production with economies of scales and with a large production of standardized products like cars and automobile or other durables like washing machine, TV, and so on. And the main issues there was the institutional change to make this mass production coupled with demand. So the new income distribution allowing the working class to have some more money than the subsistence salaries and to buy the cars, the washing machine, the TV, and so on and so forth. And that's important because what we have, you must have a scientific revolution and a new technological paradigm, but you also have to have a kind of match in between science and technology, the economy, and the society. And this match has been reached with Fordism, with this massive revolution in the income distribution of the wealth and the income. Now we we started with the ICT technologies, a completely different paradigm in terms of Fordism. So of course you have overlaps. So Fordism is declining but still surviving. But in the 80s you have the computers, PC, and then the smartphone, and then internet, and then smartphone, and now AI that are changing the rules of the games completely. And this is surely a change of paradigm in terms of Fordism, mass production, standardized product based on manufacturing, while the digital era is based on ICT, knowledge, information, and services. Now we are dealing with the AI, and the issue is, are we facing a change of paradigm, or we are still in what they call, Kuhn and Dosi, a technological trajectory. What is the technological trajectory? Is the normal state of the art, state of the world. In between two different paradigms, you may have 40, 50, 60 years, and in that period, you have what Kuhn called the normal scientific progress. So you have progress, both scientific and technological, but within a kind of narrow path. So you have boundaries defined by the paradigm, okay? So you have ICT, that is defined the paradigm, and then you have personal computers, nanotechnologies, smartphone, internet. There are strong discontinuities, but within the same trajectory. AI is actually changing the world, but the issue is is a revolution, or we are still within the ICT trajectory. And that, to be honest, the colleagues in the economics of innovation are actually split in two parties. Some are actually thinking that is a new paradigm. Some others, they say that we are still in a kind of path-dependent pattern. So this is the question. Is it a new technological paradigm or a kind of deepening the trajectory? My contribution to the debate, in a way, conceptually, is try to look at some key economic variable to understand whether we are in position A, new paradigm, revolution, or position B, deepening into the trajectory. So, I identified 10 different categories, 10 different issues. For some of them, the one underlined, I will provide some data, some evidence in this presentation, and particularly the employment impact in the second part of the presentation, while from other more on the macro sides, I don't have at the moment evidences. So, first category, technological change. What you expect if you are still in a trajectory, you expect what we call, as economists of innovation, incremental innovation. Incremental innovation is something that is important, but still related to the past. What you need for a new paradigm, you need radical technologies, not just one, but a constellation of different radical technologies, new key technologies. So not just one, constellation and enabling. Enabling means that this new technology makes all the rest of innovation activities faster and more precise and more focused. That was the case of computers. I mean, when the ICT, they actually were diffused in university, laboratories, and research centers, of course, research and science accelerated based on ICT. So this is the issues of technology that should be enabling other technologies to be faster and more precise. In terms of the nature of innovation, and this is something with patent activities you may, with data about patents you may proxy. If you are in a trajectory, process innovation are dominating. If you are thinking about the late Fordism in the 70s, 80s, and 90s of the past centuries, process innovation that were dominated. If you think about the car industry, for instance, automobile. At the beginning of the paradigm, that was the late 80s when the automobile was invented, the first model that were wooden and not steel, and there was a lot of product innovation. There were a lot of companies, a lot of startups, a lot of entrepreneurs inventing a new design for the car industry, for automobile. Then you had a kind of concentration in few actors, but not so few. Every country has their own champions in automobile industries. And then later on, there was a concentration in very few actors with massive process innovation. If you remember, probably Asturias was also affected by this. In the 80s, there were massive job losses in the automobile industry because process innovation that were dominating. And this is something that you expect when you are in a mature phase of the previous paradigm. When you are opening up a new paradigm, what you expect is product innovation. New stuff. So with Fordism, the airplane, the car, the durable for domestic use, and for ICT, the personal computers, the internet, and software, and so on and so forth. So the balancing between product and process innovation could be actually a clue to distinguish the two status. In terms of industries, What you need to change a paradigm is a revolutionary, completely new constellation of key technologies, but they have to be pervasive. For instance, if we come back to the 80s, there were other 70s, 80s, there were other revolutionary technologies. Think about the biotech. It was a revolution, but it was not pervasive. The biotech were actually applied in some sectors, like agriculture or pharmaceutics, but few sectors. So they were revolutionary, but not pervasive. The same, the nuclear energy was a completely revolutionary invention, but applied in the energy sectors. Computers, they were actually going everywhere. So pervasiveness, what the more mainstream economists, they call general purpose technologies, is a key aspect that has to be investigated. If you have a radical constellation of new technologies that are at the same time pervasive and enabling, this is what Schumpeter called creative destruction and could be actually support a new paradigm. While if you are still in the same paradigm, key sectors are dominating. So in terms of our research questions, the role of ICT sectors, electronics and manufacturing, and scientific and software and services is the key question. Are they still dominating the process or not? In terms of market structure, what you expect when you are still along a trajectory is a kind of concentrating the routinized regimes, what we call Schumpeter Mark II. You know, Schumpeter started with a view where innovation and invention, they were related to entrepreneurs, startups, new industry, and new firms. But then later on, when immigrated because of the Nazism, immigrated to the US, and so the trustification of the production of knowledge into huge and massive laboratories in capitalism, social and democracy, he actually moved to a way to see technology and innovation as something mainly done by large firms, incumbents, and so on and so forth. So this is the so-called Schumpeter Mark II. Anyway, if we are actually facing a new paradigms, what you expect is a much more competitive environment, much more entrepreneurial, a role for new firms and small and medium enterprises. And this is also reflected in terms of firms' age and size. While large and established incumbents are the dominant player in a kind of trajectory, if you are facing a new paradigms, you expect a role for startups, young firms, high-growth firms, SMEs. This is particularly tricky for the AI, because as we know, AI is at the moment still dominated by the big player, I mean the big tech. So this is a controversial kind of evidence. In terms of investments, what we expect is an intensive kind of investment, an intensive margin, and the role of scrapping and the substitution of vintages. That is the case if we are still in the ICTs. While if we are facing a new technological paradigms, we expect something additional, an extensive investment. Productivity, this is an issue, particularly for economists. What do you expect when you are facing a new paradigm? Do you expect an increase in productivity? Not at all. The very first effect could be actually a decrease in productivity. That was actually the case for the ICTs. And there is the famous Solow paradox. In 1987, Solow, actually writing down a review of a book that was completely neglected, Solow was writing down the following sentence. We see computers everywhere but in the productivity statistics. That was US in the 80s. So in the US, computers were already spreading around all the economy with some years of advantages in comparison with Europe. But there was a productivity slowdown. Maybe the elder people like me, they remember in those days in the 80s, there were a kind of debate about the decline of the US dominant role. But this is a short-term effect. And this is particularly related to the mismatch. A new technology is coming in, but companies, institutions, and the society is not ready to implement the new technology. So you have a counterproductive effect. At the first stage, you have a productivity slowdown. Later on, when you have a match in between organization within the companies, education systems, financial sectors, and the other component of a national innovation systems, you have the match and you have a booming in productivity. And this was the case in the 90s with the new economy and the productivity increase. While if you are in a trajectory, what you expect is a slow increase of productivity without shocks. Demand and growth. If a kind of paradigm is saturating, that was the case of Ford. At the beginning, you have an increase in demand. Every family in US and Europe and the rest of the world has to buy an automobile, has to buy a washing machine, has to buy a TV. But then, of course, you have just a substitution demand and gradually saturating. And this is when a paradigm is actually moving to the downward phase. While, of course, if you have a new technological paradigms, new products, new firms, emerging sectors, you should have an increase in demand with the diffusion of technologies, not at the very beginning. The introduction of new technologies, they don't have a clear impact in terms of demand. You have the growth effects when you have a diffusion. That was made clear by one of my mentors, Chris Freeman, one of the founder of economics innovation. That was very clear that a new paradigm is introduced. That was the case of ICT, was introduced in the 60s, the 70s. If you remember, internet was actually used by the military forces, the US military forces in the 60s. You don't have the effect when it's introduced. You have the effect when you have a diffusion of the new technologies. That could be 10 or 20 years later. In terms of the institution we already mentioned, you should have a match in order to have a new paradigm. But when a new paradigm is starting, you are likely to have an initial mismatch. In terms of unemployment impact, and that will be the focus of the second part of the presentation, you have mostly a cost-saving, a labor-saving effect when you are maturing a new technology, older technologies, while a new paradigm should have some kind of labor-friendly impact, because we have new products, new industries, new companies, and the kind of job creation. So why we try to investigate at least some of these issues with this data set that was actually constructed at the GRC, the research center of the European Commission based in Spain, in Sevilla. And we started from European Patent Office PathStat data that are covering the world patenting activities. And then we fed the algorithms with keywords related to AI, a kind of broader concept of AI. We will see the keywords in a while, including automation and robots. Then we made the match, and we isolated AI patent families over the period 2000-2016 worldwide. What is a family? The family is identified by PathStat as a clear invention. If this invention, this algorithm, for instance, is patenting in Munich, in Washington, Tokyo, and Seoul is just one family. So you don't have the duplication of patent that they should have if you just count the patents. So these are families. And we identified AI whether some of the keywords, at least one of the keywords, is actually used in the titles of the abstract of the patents. Then we match this data set with Orbis, that probably most of you are familiar with, in order to get the economic variable, the sector of belonging, the location, and turnover, number of employees, and investments. This data set is also at the core of the econometric test that we run in the second part. These are the list of keywords. These were identified by the GRC at that time, put it together different sources, including European Commission, OECD, and other sources, and these were singled out. Again, nowadays there are a lot of providers of AI keywords. We are working on that, making a longer list of keywords, but still the core are the one listed here. And if you overlap the different sources, you obtain something very similar to this list. These are the first data. I hope you can see, but I can summarize. So at the end of the day, we are working on about 24,000 companies that have at least one AI patent in the investigated period. And we also look, of course, at the overall patenting activities on other technologies that are still largely dominated, more than 90% of innovation, even by companies that are in a way active in AI, are actually concerning other kind of innovation. So we are dealing with 24,000, about more than 100,000 patents in AI, and 6.5 million patents in non-AI patent families. What we can see is an exponential increase of AI patenting. So the overall rate of change, if we compare the first 5 years and the last 5 years, is more than 300%, compared to an increase of 15% of the overall innovation activities. So that means that the weight of AI in patenting in these firms is increasing. And you can see in the last column, we start from 0.7%. We are now to 3.5, and probably still increasing. And what we can see? We can see also that the overall per capita patenting activity in AI is likely to decrease. So we start at the beginning from 3 AI patents per companies. That has been decreased to 2.6. So a little bit clue of a kind of diffusion of the process. Industries. If we look at the entire period, we have a kind of support of the idea that we are still in the same trajectories. Why? Because the core ICT manufacture that is electronic and the core ICT services that are telecommunication and other devices are actually dominating the scenario, both for the AI patent families that are the brown and then non-AI patent families that are the gray. So at the first glance, it seems that this kind of AI innovation activity is still well-rooted in ICT industries. However, if we see the rate of change and if we look over time, what we see is that shifts in the AI patent families activities, innovation activities, are much larger, sharper than in non-AI patent activities. For instance, the retreat from electronics that is common to the overall innovation activity is much more pronounced in AI patent families. And the penetration of AI in education, scientific, and retail is much more, is larger for AI patent families than non-AI patent families. So we have some evidence of a kind of diffusion of AI patenting activities beyond the core ICT sectors. And this is even more obvious if we look at trends. Now the colors are I hope that you can distinguish. Anyway, the main trend is what you have in electronics. Electronics in AI patent families was about 40% of patenting activity and is dropping down together with other manufacturing. While you have the orange one that is exploding, that are services, other services. These trends are common to non-AI patent families, but much less sharp. So in the other innovation activities, electronics is still dominating, is about 35% of patenting activities. So this is a clear evidence that even in that period, that is the nascent diffusion of AI, AI started from ICT core sectors and then diffusing. We still have a clear role of information and communication services that is not declining, but in manufacturing electronics, there is actually some evidence of pervasiveness. This is the innovative entry rates. That is not the entry rates in terms of industrial economics. It's the entry rates as new patents in AI. So companies patenting in AI for the first time in their life over all the companies. And this kind of entry rate that was already very high at the beginning is actually increasing. And this is another evidence in support of what I call Schumpeter Mark I. So there are new entries, new actors that enter the fields of AI. And if we zoom on that, the number and the age of these new innovative entries is dramatically changing over the period. So the number is increasing, but that's something that we already seen in the previous slides. But the age, there was about 35 years. So larger incumbents patenting in AI at the beginning of the period, they were dominating. This is, the average age is dramatically decreasing from 35 to about 12. So the role of new firms and younger firms is exploding in AI patenting. The evidence of size a little bit weak, because we have this variable for a minority of companies. But still, we have some evidence that the median number of employees at the moment of the first AI patenting is actually decreasing. And the number of companies patenting in AI in the first years by foundation is increasing. So the role of newborn entries, these are a subsample of what we discussed before. These are companies that are actually patenting for the first time and also entering the market for the first time. So are really innovative startups. These innovative startups, that is the red one, is exponentially increasing. Again, another evidence of an entrepreneurial regime. If we plot for on the left, the AI patent families, on the right, all the other one, If we plot the patenting companies by age, we see that there's a clear role for the startups and the younger companies in AI. So, for instance, the role of very, very older incumbents is declining even for the non-AI from 70% to 40%. But if you look at the AI, it's now shrinking to less than 20%. So it seems to be that, at least in terms of this kind of patenting activity, there is a lot of roles for young, even innovative startups and young firms. Anyway, this is something to take with a grain of salt, because that means that the first kind of innovation, it could be up to new startups, younger firms, but that in the long run, it could be that these startups are actually bought by Microsoft or Google, and so concentration is increasing at the end of the day. But in terms of innovation activities, we have some evidence that the role for new firms and younger firms is definitely increasing, and particularly increasing in AI innovation activities. These are the concentration ratios, again, in terms of patenting innovation activities. These are decreasing, particularly decreasing for AI patent activities. So if we look at the concentration rate 20, so the share of the top 20 patenting firms in AI and non-AI, what we see is that the concentration rate, that is the blue one, is lower than the overall one and decreasing. These are the Sperman correlation in between ranking. So we have the ranking of innovation companies and the same ranking the year after. That is like comparing a football ranking. So I've been told that there will be a big change in the ranking because Oviedo was upgraded to the first division. So the Sperman correlation should decrease next year. And this is the same story. And if we look at the top 10, top 50, top 200, and the overall, again, we see that the stability of ranking for AI innovation activity is systematically lower. The stability is systematically lower for the blue line for AI, particularly if we go beyond the top 10, and is also decreasing. That means that there is a lot of dynamics in the innovation activities in AI, while the rest is very, very stable. So the innovation activities in general terms is up to the same kind of companies. Of course, this kind of sample is really biased because we were looking for patent activities in AI. So all the giants, all the incumbents are there. And the stability for the innovation activity is really strong with a Sperman correlation that is almost 0.9, while is lower with a lot of changes in dynamics for the AI. Finally, the enabling capabilities of AI innovation. How we try to measure the enable activities? We try to measure in this way. We have the time where a company is innovating in AI for the first time in the company life cycle. So we compare the patent activities the 3 years before and the 3 years after. And what we got is that the average number of patents in other technologies before the AI innovation was about 24 patents per company over 5 years, and is increasing to about 45 3 years after. So we have a huge increase of the general innovation activities after the entering in AI, about 70%, 78%. Compare with the general trends, that is about 6% in between the two periods. We have, in a way, a strong evidence that the entering in AI domain is actually accelerating all the rest, particularly for the top percentiles, for the more innovative firms. So some evidence supporting the enabling role of these new technologies. Here we compare the top 20, and the top 20 at the beginning of the period are dominated by Japanese manufacturing and robot companies, while not surprisingly, in the last 5 years, we have the role of China, particularly research institution in Chinese university. Korea is entering the top rank, while US and Japan are actually less dominant than before. But this is also correlated with the data set that has a kind of bias in favor of Europe, because it's coming from the European Patent Office, and with a substantial downgrading of US patenting. So these are more or less the conclusion of this piece of research. That is not definitive at all. First of all, because of limitation of data that I recall at the beginning of this speech. But still, there are some evidence that a new paradigm is starting with some kind of characteristics in terms of detection from core ICT industries, so some issues, some clues of pervasiveness, the role of newcomers and younger companies, a less concentrated situation, and some evidence in terms of enabling technologies. So it's still an open question, but I personally tend to think that, particularly with generative AI, we really have to think about a new kind of paradigm. That's as important policy implication, because as I mentioned before, if you don't have the right match in between the new paradigm and institution, financial sectors, and education, what you have is mismatch and actually productivity slow down. So the challenge in terms of institutional change, I think, is important, and the challenge in terms of employment is also important. And so we shift to the labor market. So most of the literature is actually focusing on the labor-saving effect, including my own research. And if you like, we can discuss later when we open to the question and comments. But in this paper, we do different things. But anyway, the literature is actually based on this fear of technological unemployment. Why? Because with AI, robots, self-driving cars, and generative AI are actually affecting all the occupation. And so this is a real change in comparison to what we were used to discuss some decades ago. If you remember, the debate in the 90s was about the skill bias technological change. So a kind of technological change that was labor saving, but particularly for blue collars, less educated, and those kind of low skills jobs. While some areas they were preserved or even increasing in terms of demand of labor. Later on in 2000, you are familiar with the debate was about routinized versus non-routinized jobs. So the idea was that routinized jobs, they were actually at the core of the substitution effects by technologies, while the non-routinized, they were safe. And the non-routinized, they were paralyzed. They were cognitive kind of task, like university professor or managerial, top managerial jobs and so on and so forth, but also other kind of even low-skilled jobs, like, for instance, the caregivers that require personal relationships, and they were considered safe. Nowadays, the whole spectrum of occupation is actually at risk, because you have robots and generative AI that can actually construct and making this speech maybe better than myself, and you have robots that can actually, or exoskeleton or this kind of application in healthcare, and also caregivers that can partially substitute even those kind of jobs. So the idea is that the unemployment could be massive, and we have this highly cited work by Frey and Osborne from Oxford University, published in Technological Forecasting and Social Change, where they conclude that about 50% of jobs are at risk. We have a paper by Acemoglu and Restrepo that started to work on these issues about 10 years ago, and they have some evidence about, particularly, they have evidence about the robotization of local labor market in US and the labor-saving effects of robots, with a lot of replication studies in Europe. This kind of prediction could be more or less pessimistic, whether you focus on occupation or whether you focus on task. This is a kind of divide in the literature, because if you look at occupation and you see whether some task within the occupation is at risk, and then you conclude that the entire occupation is at risk, you reach 50% or even more. But if you take in consideration that actually some tasks can be substituted, but some other not, you have more optimistic kind of expectations. So for instance, in our jobs, probably a generative AI can create a good lecture for basic microeconomics for the first year students, or introductory to macroeconomics. But then when you go to more advanced or PhD courses, that's much more difficult, and you have to be more creative, and so maybe we have still something to do as teachers. So if you look at tasks, you can see that a radiologist can be substituted in X-ray screening and scanning, but not in other tasks. So the job is not at risk. So other forecasting, they are actually much more optimistic. The OECD is about 10%, with a standard deviation that is very large across sectors, across industry, across countries. Anyway, all this kind of literature is about the downstream industries. So the application of robots, automation, algorithms, AI application in the downstream user industries, where of course what you expect is a labor-saving effect. So as is in the slides, robots killing all human jobs. And most of the literature is on that, with controversial results, generally highlighting a labor-saving effect that could be more or less pronounced. In this paper, in this research, we try to look at the right side of the coin, the other side of the coin, that is the provider of the new technologies, the patenting firms, the companies that we have analyzed in the first section. So the upstream sectors, the one where the algorithms or the robots or the AI device is a product innovation that, of course, has to be considered a process innovation where it is used by the downstream sectors. But within the providing and the supply industry is a product innovation and should have some kinds of labor-friendly effect. So the idea is there a job creation effect there? Is significant or not, both in terms of statistical significance and magnitude? Is general or concentrated in some subset? And that's what we try to do with a quite standard methodologies. What we have, as you already know, because we already discussed it, we have a panel of more than 24,000 firms over 17 years. So what we have is a panel, and for this kind of purpose and the nature of the data, what we use is a dynamic labor demand equation augmented with a proxy of innovation that in our case is patents. Again, patents in AI, patents in the rest of the innovation activities. And then we also weighted this kind of patent in terms of the size of the families. So the idea is that if a company is patenting a particular patent in different parts of the world, that means that that patent is particularly relevant, particularly important, because to patents in different patent offices is very costly, and it's very expensive. So this is a way to weight the role of the different patents. And then we have the traditional drivers of the labor demand, that is output. So we expect beta 1 positive, wages, we expect beta 2 negative, gross investments. And here we have some controversial expectation, because on the one hand, you have an expansionary effect, a positive one, but you also can implement labor-saving technologies. You have this kind of embodied technological change effects. So we don't have a clear expectation about beta 3, and then we have the lag-dependent variable. Why? Because the labor demand is very sticky, as you know, in terms of hiring and firing. It's not easy to hire and firing, and this is actually the example of the Arellano Bond article back in the 90s. That is the demand of labor is the example they did about the role of the lag dependent. That of course is endogenous. We made the hypothesis also the other variable could be endogenous and be instrumented where necessary, and we used GMM-CIS instead of GMM-DIF, because the nature of our data is really path dependence. So when you have this kind of autocorrelating nature of the dependent variable, GMM-CIS is more efficient in statistical terms than GMM-DIF. And the cross-sectional variability is actually dominating in comparison of the within firms variability. And then the Sargent test is also supporting this. So we use GMM-CIS. We did some kind of trimming about the data in terms of outliers. We dropped the 1%, the tail of the distribution, but this is something that we can easily skip. These are the variables used. So we have employment, that is the number of employees, turnover in terms of output, gross investments, labor cost per employee, that is better than wage, because from the point of view of the companies, this is the cost of labor. And then we have the AI patent families, as I mentioned before, the rough number and the weighted variable. We are dealing with very large companies. The mean is about 5,000 employees, because we are actually dealing with the top innovator in the world. We made different splitting to see whether there were some differences. The sectoral differences, the age and the AI intensity, they actually provide different results. We also tried to distinguish SMEs and larger firms, but we didn't find significant differences. What is AI intensity? Is the focus of a company on AI patenting. That is, to be over the medium in terms of AI patenting. So those firms that are actually more intense in AI activity, to see whether we have a kind of decreasing or decreasing returns in terms of employment input. And this kind of, this was asked by a referee, this kind of splitting are not overlapped. So there are 3 different splitting that are actually telling different stories. The all overlap is only 23%. The distribution of sectors we already discussed in the first part. Overall, over the entire period, we still have a dominant role of the ICT sectors, electronics, machinery, telecommunication, and scientific services. Distribution across countries, this is the second strong limitation of this data set that is common to both PASTAT and Orbis. When you match PASTAT and Orbis, you have this increasing role of Asian and European companies and underestimation of US. Even if all the big tech are there, but I don't remember whether Microsoft Alphabet, I think Alphabet is not there. I don't know why, but the other big players are included. So, the baseline. The baseline results are supporting the control variable. Well, I don't report here in the table the diagnostic test. In some cases, the Lagrange multiplier asks for 2 years lags, in some cases 3 years lags in the instruments. The Hansen is generally rejecting the null, but this is quite common with very large data set, so we repeated for smaller samples, I think 10%, and is never rejected. So the diagnoses are confirming the GMMCs. The controls are behaving as expected with lagged employment, turnover positive, gross investment positive but not so significant, and labor cost negative. If we focus the red coefficients about the coefficients of innovation activities, what we found out at the very beginning is that in terms of rough number of patents, we don't have any significant difference in between the labor-friendly impact of innovation in general and the labor-friendly impact of AI. About this, everything is in log, so the elasticity is 2%, a little bit more than 2%. This is consistent with the literature. The literature, even including some papers of mine, when using either R&D or patents, we identify kind of labor-friendly impact, probably connected with the product innovation nature of this kind of innovation. But this impact is generally very small, so the magnitude is in between 0.2, 0.4, and in some of the previous literature is actually concentrated in some particular industries. But here the research question is that there is some differences in between AI and non-AI. When we weight the patents, actually, we find some clues of differences. So we have a slightly significant, barely significant impact of AI, while it's not significant in non-AI. So our conclusion was that here we probably have some kind of composition effects, that is aggregating all the data set is probably disguising some differences. So we started our splits, and we started from services and manufacturing. And what we noticed is that the overall labor-friendly impact is actually in services. And the differences in between AI and non-AI are not so striking. As you can see, if we use a rough pattern, this seems to be that non-AI is dominating, but actually if we weight, that is the more reliable results, the overall impact of AI is slightly larger for AI than all the other innovation activities, but the difference is not significant. We have to remember that here are companies that are active in AI. So that means that we are dealing with companies that are, in a way, something to do with AI, even when they patent in other technologies. If we split in terms of age of the firms, all the labor-friendly impact is for relatively younger firms, founded after 1990, and not for older firms. And here again, we have some clue, particularly when we wait for family size, that the issue and the impact is actually mainly due to AI patent family, the last column. And finally, if we split in terms of AI specialized versus non-AI specialized, so above the median in terms of patenting activities in AI and below the median, all the labor-friendly impact is there in the AI specialized, so we have a kind of increasing returns. And here, again, the results seems to be in line with a labor-friendly impact both for AI and non-AI. So overall, we don't find a clear difference between the labor-friendly impact. The labor-friendly impact seems to be there, but the most interesting results are that this labor-friendly impact for this kind of AI-active companies is concentrated in service sectors, younger firms, and those firms particularly active in AI. So again, some clue of kind of enabling role of AI, particularly in services and younger firms, anyway with heterogeneity. So even the labor-friendly impact that we detect in these companies that are supplier of this technology is small, is heterogeneous across industries and across firms, and probably not able to compensate the labor-saving effect that we have in the downstream sectors. So the bright side of the coin can be detected, but is not so illuminating the scenario. So we have some, these results support some evidence of a labor-friendly impact for the providers of these new technologies, but is not so large in magnitude, is concentrated in some companies and some industries, and so it's probably not able to counterbalance what you can find in the downstream sectors. So in a way, the fear of technological unemployment is still justified. It was also in the mind of Fernand Léger more than 100 years ago. This painting has been painted in 1917, and robots are actually playing cards. That is a very cognitive kind of task. So that means that concern about possible labor-saving effect of new technologies are there have been there for a long time, and we are still dealing with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vivarelli. A lot of things to think, maybe some questions, if you like.
I'm sorry it was a little bit longer than expected, but I'm sure that we have enough time to...
Yeah, we have plenty of time. Lunch is up too, so we have plenty of time. Any person would like to ask anything? Okay, I can start. Sorry? No. Please. Maybe we have no microphone, so.
Because the results are quite surprising to me, the positive results for the labor market. But as I understood, the data set covers up to 2016. So just maybe your thoughts on how the new wave of AI, I know that there's no empirical evidence, but maybe any insights or intuition on whether the results would still be positive and statistically significant, or because I understand that now we are probably dealing with a paradigm shift, so maybe the results would be more positive. That's what I understood from the presentation, but maybe you have any thoughts on that.
Thank you for the question. I'm trying to find out. Yeah. The main point about the positive results is not so much related to the time span, but is related to the point that in this particular paper, we focus on the supply sides. So we are the innovators, the provider of patenting in AI. So we have the software house that is promoting a new algorithms, and in order to have an innovation and to build up this new algorithm, has to hire data scientists, for instance, or engineers. So we are capturing that kind of effect that is labor-friendly in the upstream sectors, the suppliers of new technologies. So what I expect with the generative AI is an even larger impact on that. I mean, China is now building up a generative AI kind of algorithm that is competitive to ChatGPT, and those companies are probably hiring people. So this is what we get in the upstream sectors. But of course, the main results you can get overall are the downstream sectors that are, I don't know, in US they are 90% of the economy, in Italy, Spain, Southern Europe are 99% of the economy. So in another paper that has been published in Research Policy, we try to actually to estimate both the labor-friendly impact in the upstream industries and the labor-saving impact in the downstream sectors. And we did with this kind of let me check whether. Sorry, I'm shifting. Oh yeah, this is the idea. So think about a new product that could be a machinery, could be a robot, or an AI algorithm. The AI algorithm is actually provided by science-based upstream sectors, as the one we were discussing today, that are based on R&D, and what I should expect is a labor creation effect. But then the algorithm is sold to downstream users, or the robots or the algorithms, and the downstream industries is using these new devices, and here we have either an expansionary investments or a replacement investments, where the algorithm is actually substituting, I don't know, clerks in a company. There's a massive evidence, for instance, for accountancy. There are massive substitution, or translators, or other kind of jobs. So you have this kind of replacement investments, so you expect a labor destruction kind of effect. And In this particular paper, we use data from ICD, and we split sectors upstream and downstreams according to the available kind of taxonomies. And what we found out in this paper is actually a labor-friendly impact in the upstream sectors that is quite small and not so significant, is the last coefficients 0.011, while when we look at the downstream sectors, the downstream industries, we see that the expansionary effect is limited, both in terms of magnitude and in terms of significance. Instead, the labor-saving impact, the OECD data, they allow you to distinguish the scrapping in a way, the substitution kind of component of the fixed capital formation, and we detected a larger and more significant impact in the downstream sectors. So overall, we are not claiming with the research that I presented today that the labor-friendly impact is dominating. Probably is not. But still, you have this positive effect. So in terms, for instance, of innovation and industrial policy, if European economic policy is addressing to move to AI, but even green technologies, and not rearm Europe. So completely different kind of policy. It was the policy of the European Union until last year. Then now we are changing to these new trajectories where AI and digital technologies are deeply and increasingly involved, by the way. Anyway, if we move to these kind of technologies, this is good for competitiveness, is good for growth, but probably is also good for employment, because there you have a slightly labor-friendly impact. While if you are still specialized in the downstream sectors, the situation can be gloomy in terms of policy implication. And unfortunately, this is, it should be somewhere, yes, it's, unfortunately, Europe is dominated by the low-tech downstream industries. So it's not in the paper, it's a simple exercise, but just by curiosity, we map Europe according to the high-tech and low-tech in terms of our taxonomy. That is based on the Pavic taxonomy, maybe some of you are familiar, updated by another article in Research Policy in 2010 by Bogliacino and Pianta. They updated the two services. So we have the upstream sectors that are the provider of new technologies in ICT and AI, and the downstream sectors that are all the rest of the economy. And the upstream sectors are concentrated in Northern Europe and metropolitan area, while Europe and particularly particularly Southern Europe and Eastern Europe is dominated by downstream sectors. The sectors where in that particular paper we found out the labor-saving effect. So diversification is crucial, and of course you have to diversify to the providers of new technology, to the high tech. Is not an easy task, because you cannot jump from textile to microprocessor. But the concept advanced by colleagues in regional economics, and I know there's in this university a very good research group on that, what Boschma and others, they call related variety. So a kind of diversification that is related to your previous specialization, but is still moving to more advanced AI tech technologies, may also have a good impact in terms of balance of the employment impact of the different technologies. Instead, if you are stuck on very traditional sectors, the labor-saving effect seems to be dominant.
So you're running the policy, the implications that the
in my view, the suggestion in terms of policy implication is to be selective. That means that if you are supporting, for instance, startups, and everywhere in Europe there are both national and regional and local incentive to startups. But you may do kind of erga omnes, so give money to any kind of foundation of new firms, or to be selective. So you give money and incentive or tax subsidies just for startups that reveal to be product innovators in some key industries, like the one we mentioned. But the incentive by politicians are the opposite. Because if you say, well, I give money just to few startups very active in upstream sectors and in AI patenting, you give money to 5% of population, and the other 95 are angry with you, they don't vote for you the next election. If you give a little bit of money to everybody, you increase your consensus. So the selective industrial economic policy is actually orthogonal to the incentive of politicians. And it's not a case that has been implemented particularly in kind of autocratic situation like China today or Korea in the 80s and 90s, that was a pseudo-democracy, was actually run by military and a few families. And they decided, Samsung and the politicians and the military general, they decided, well, we keep on traditional manufacturing, but we make a clear investments in electronics, and then we have now Samsung and so on and so forth, and a smartphone and a leading situation. Korea is now the top leader R&D investor in the world, more than Japan, more than US. But there, the decision was made by a few families and a ruling and in a way not democratic ruling politicians. Here is more complicated, and there are some examples of selected policies, but generally they don't have a great success because they have to be selective, and so they have to give a prize to few and to frustrate the majority, and that's in terms of and that could be risky for the politician's career.
Okay, more questions? Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear the feedback. So in the paper as a model, what is my reading at that point is that there is like a race between jobs that are being created and jobs that are being destroyed. But with AI, I don't know if my thinking about that is slightly different, because to use AI is like quite easy. So, I mean, how to use it is not as difficult as running a new machine, which you need to create cars now instead of the people doing it. So instead of, I mean, it's like not very formally in my mind, but how I think about it is not a destruction of the job per se, but more a transformation of it. Like, for example, a hairstylist before just cuts the hair, and now it's going to be a hairstylist plus the AI helping on which one is going to be the best haircut that you can have. So like, if I can think differently between the papers of Acemoglu and Restrepo on this job destruction, and now it's like with AI, I don't know if it's slightly different, or we can still follow like that kind of thought.
Thank you very much. Very interesting points. I think there are two issues here. One is purely concerning AI algorithms and technologies, whether they are complements or substitution. So we have some evidence that some kind of advanced and AI-related technologies are complements. Example in surgical operation. The robots is there, but you still need the doctor to use the robots. So in healthcare, there are these kind of complementary aspects. So you have the exoskeleton that is using physiotherapics, because you still need the physiotherapist. So this is on the technological sides. We have to see in the different specific situation in terms of technology, industries, and labor tasks, whether the algorithm is actually substitution or complements. For instance, in the moving industry, it seems to be that the substitution is dominant, because the screenplay is actually initially selected by an algorithm, and so you have 99% rejected, and then the human beings and the director is just reading 1% of the proposals. And even in our referee jobs, we are now alerted not to use AI, but it could be the case that in some years' times, the first death rejection project would be automated by AI, and this is labor saving. So it's really specific in terms of technology. In terms of the Acemoglu-Restrepo approach, the idea is that you have a continuous range of tasks from 0 to 1, and then you have a kind of pointer, and the pointer is actually splitting those that are automatable and those that are not automatable, and according to the model by Acemoglu-Restrepo, this is mainly due to the relative price of robots or automation technologies and labor. So one of the policy implications that is promoted by Acemoglu is to tax robots in order to increase their price and to make labor more attractive. Of course, you can also do the reverse. You can suggest decreasing wages as a solution. I think that this is not the way to address the topic, because as most of economists do, they completely neglect the nature and the path dependence of technologies. So these kind of new technologies, they are really path dependent, they are cumulative, irreversible, and they go in their direction. And they make a decrease in average cost overall in a company. And so they are mostly unaffected by relative price of labor and capital. Just to provide you a very simplified, let me check whether it's so
in the other side.
It's there. So the main problem, I think, in this kind of traditional economics view is the shape of the isoquants. I don't know where I have in this material something that can be. No, I don't have. Anyway, a lot of years ago, Atkinson and Stiglitz, Economic Journal, 1969, they were talking about localized technological change. Technological change is not something that you can choose. So you have, I don't know, an increase in the price of robots because of taxation, decreasing wages, and so you shift, and the pointer is shifting to the left, and less labor is automatable because labor is cheaper. It's not like that. Technology is really localized, it is incremental, and so production function is actually moving, but also changing in shape. And particularly the isoquant for smooth is much more skewed, and at the end it could be 90% a kind of a rectangular angle. In that case, any shift in the isocourse is completely unaffected in terms of technology is unaffected by the relative prices. So in other words, if wages are going down, the price of robots are going up, we don't go back to more labor-intensive manufacturing. We don't go back to the assembly line of the 80s. Because after decades of automatization, everything is now localized and everything is connected to these new technologies. So technology is going on a trajectory that is likely affected by the relative price of capital and labor. So that's why I don't think this is a convincing perspective. While, of course, this trajectory could be more or less complements or substitute in terms of task. This is intrinsic to technologies, and it could be the case that in some industries, in some companies, the complement impact is dominating, as in your example. In some others, the substitution is dominating. And we have example on both sides. Again, the telemedicine is an example. Telemedicine tends to substitute in some way doctors, but on the other hand, you have other kind of more relationships with patients that are related to these kind of interpersonal relations that could be helped by a robot or an AI, but still need human beings. So I tend I would focus more on the nature of technologies than on the story that economists are confident in, that is the relative prices. And even if you have a dominant role of shifting task, that is, some tasks are affected, some tasks are preserved, so you need this kind of shift. Still, you may have bottlenecks. So if you have an increase in the demand of a particular task, but your supply is limited, here the compensatory and expansion effect could be limited by the supply of that particular skills. So that means that the qualitative effects in terms of the different occupation may actually create a bottlenecks in terms of the overall compensation. So even if the effect is mainly in terms of distribution of jobs, still, if you have bottlenecks on the supply, you have a problem in terms of the overall employment impact.
Okay.
Yes, so very interesting. You presented your labor market effects as, on the one hand, the negative effects, job destruction through substitution, and on the other hand, the suppliers that have increased demand and job creation. And then you ended in your conclusions, for example, you say that the job creation is limited compared to what we may expect in terms of job destruction. Feel that maybe machines, the suppliers of the new technologies, but they can, to take an extreme example, today we have a spectacular increase in the number of yoga teachers compared to 10 years ago. And you might argue, economically speaking, that this is a result of technological change as productivity increase, income increases, and we spend our money on yoga, right? Because that's apparently what we like to do. So my question is, I mean, do you agree that that's a channel, first of all? Right? It's one of the job creation channels. And secondly, you know, from an empirical point of view, do we manage to empirically account for that channel? Should we? And how should we communicate to folks?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is an issue that I've investigated in the past and still investigating. It was actually at the core of the keynote I gave 10 years ago. In general terms, any kind of process innovation, direct labor saving effect can be compensated in different ways. One is the product innovation in the upstream sector. So is the other side of innovation. You have a process innovation, that is that the isoquant is going towards zero, and so you need less capital and labor to have the same output. This is the direct effects. But then economists, even in the classical times, they focus on possible compensating effects. And the one you mentioned that is called by Acemoglu and Restrepo the productivity effect. So Acemoglu and Restrepo in their model, they talk about the substitution effect, that is the direct labor saving effect, and then they talk about possible compensation. And one is the productivity effects. So what happens? So it happens that what you have is a decrease in average cost as a direct impact of technological change. And these decreasing average costs, they can go in different directions. So the first direction that is over there in the upper right is decreasing average cost, decreasing price, increasing demand, increasing production of labor. That could be in different sectors. So I have a decrease because, I don't know, automobile industry is fully automatized, so I can buy a car with a price that is 50%, and then I spend my saving in yoga or tourism services. So these kind of compensation effects are intersectors. This is if you have perfect competition. If you are in a situation where perfect competition is not there, as is most of the cases, that means that this productivity effect is capped, at least partially, by investor and workers, but still investor, they can, entrepreneur, they can make additional investments. Workers, they may have an increase in demand. And so you have another channels. That is the one on the down left angle. So increasing profitability and increasing investments and increasing demand and increasing production and increasing in the demand for labor. If unions have some kind of power, that was more common in the past centuries, but still some kind of the productivity gains, they can be appropriated by workers and they can increase demand. These are channels that are working. The issue is that there could be serious problems in terms of the demand elasticity, in terms of the decrease in demand that you have as a direct effect of the technological unemployment, in terms of expectation. So you have decreasing prices, but your expectations are particularly pessimistic, so the investor, they just wait and they don't invest the additional income. So it could be the case that you have additional income allowed by the new technologies, but these are not immediately spent by consumers and investors because of negative expectation. That means that you have some kind of lag in this kind of counterbalancing. But if you have a lag, since technological change is continuous, you create a kind of structural effect. So the issue is really open. you have different channels to compensate. Probably the main one is the upstream sectors and the product innovation. But even process innovation in downstream sectors, they have this kind of productivity effect that via income or via prices, they can increase demand. But you also have attrition problems, expectations that could be negative. So you may have 100% or 50% in terms of compensation. And this really depends, of course, depends on technology, but depends on different industry, different kind of institutional setting. For instance, a very competitive environment is much more in favor of decreasing prices and increasing demand. If you have a more concentrated and monopolistic or oligopolistic situation, most of the rent is kept by the companies, and the companies can procrastinate investments. And in this case, it is more difficult to have this kind of effect. So, yeah, the mechanisms are all there and working, but could be more or less effective depending on the different stage of the economic cycle, the different expectation, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
I was thinking more from the point of view of policy implication, but more on the side of the worker. Because if on a side trying to push the curve to diversify with an upward swing of the production, well, and that can increase the number of hiring of the net flux. But well, the people fired or that choose to work from a downside firm, and the one that start to work in an upward stream of the production, let's say, are not the same. So from the, because of course if you take up someone who was worked as a hairdresser to convert to a work that has a huge use of AI is not that easy. So I was thinking if I was want to ask your opinion regarding the policy implication for the worker. So we know that the population is aging, that the labor force accordingly, and for Italian, so the problem is pressing. So we see it every day. From the point of view of the policy toward the formation of the workers, so we have to, of course, try to reinforce the knowledge in ICT and artificial intelligence. And for the younger people, it's easier, I think, than for people older that have work not automatically, not using this kind of technology. And I think that also they are left a little bit aside because it's more difficult to take care in the sense of them. Because, but the problem is pressing because you cannot leave older people at home without working and just hire younger people because they are not very work. So I wanted to ask you what kind of
No, thank you for a question that is partially related to your one. And this is actually the linkages in between the effect in terms of occupation or task distribution and the overall effect. That are related actually, partially for the reason you mentioned. Here is something that is a very simple example that I use for teaching, but I think is useful. Here, what we have a steady state initial situation where we have a full employment of both the high skill educated and younger people and the low skill less educated and maybe elder people. So we have 120 in terms of output. We have an output labor ratio of 1 and a ratio between skill and skill 1-to-1. So at the beginning of this example, we have full employment of both the skilled and the unskilled, or let's say the automatable or non-automatable in terms of Acemoglu task. Then you have the effect, and the effect is both labor saving and skill bias, or task or routine biased. So you have the coefficient now is 2-to-1 in terms of output to labor ratio, as a 2-to-1 about skill and unskilled. That means as a direct effect, you can now employ 40 skilled and 20 unskilled. And you have 60 people unemployed. Then you have a kind of compensation through the mechanism that were mentioned, price and income. So you manage, for the different mechanisms that we were discussing, to increase the overall GDP, the overall output. But still, you have a plafond, because the maximum you can have with this kind of situation is to increase the output to 180, to have to going back to the full employment of the skilled or the young or the less automatable, but still 50% of the low skill or low task or older people are unemployed. So you still have policy problems. Possible solution. You may have, let's say, a right-wing solution that is related to the idea that the relative prices are important. So you decrease wages of the low skills in order to incentivize labor-intensive technologies. That I have a lot of doubts about that, and I already discussed it. And what you have is that you partially solve the unemployment problems, but you create the working poor one. That is something that we are now facing in Italy. That the unemployment is going down, but the working poor are going up, because apparently the solution was to decrease wages. The other solution is more left-wing, that is training and retraining. So you have to move the low skills becomes up skills, and you don't have anymore the supply constraints. But this is difficult, because it's very difficult to retrain older people over 50 that was used to work in manufacturing and to become a data scientist. It's absolutely impossible. So you can do some training, but you have to particularly to leverage on the education systems, and so safety nets and some kinds of welfare for the disadvantaged should be thought and should be implemented, because it's quite difficult to compensate, even in terms of the qualitative effects, the effects in terms of occupation. So you need to preserve the welfare, and otherwise you have serious problems in terms of social cohesion. And I think that the U.S. are exactly the example of what happens. If you don't care about this combination of effects, the quantitative one, the overall one, and the internal one in terms of occupation.
Okay. Maybe I think I can finish now. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you.
Vivarelli. Very interesting.